Calvin Ridley wasn't in Atlanta for a long time, but boy, it was a hell of a good time.
You are Locked On Falcons, your daily Atlanta Falcons podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back, everyone, to another illustrious episode of the Locked On Falcons podcast, your daily Atlanta Falcons podcast, part of Locked On Sports Atlanta, your team every day. And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more as the playoffs wind down. These sports stop sporting like we want them to. But this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn to get started. So if you do not know me, I'm your very humble host, Aaron Freeman, a.k.a. Mr. Drew, a.k.a. Sirius Black, covering the Falcons for a lifetime, formerly at FalcFans.com, RIP, still going strong in this illustrious podcast. And I thank each and every one of you that is an everydayer of this pod that makes it your first listen or first watch each and every day. And all you got to do to become an everydayer is subscribe or follow for free on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. So today's episode is another Falcons Historian Player Shootout, which is our summer-long series, which is a trivia tournament. We pit two contestants against one another to answer questions about a Falcons legendary player from the past 20 or so years. Of course, I'm here alongside my co-host for this series, Allen Strk, a contributor at the Falcoholic. And today's Falcons legend is Calvin Ridley. And we'll be pitting Will McFadden, editor over at AtlantaFalcons.com, against Joe Patrick, who covers the Falcons beat for 92.9 The Game. And they'll be answering questions about Calvin Ridley. So without further ado, let's jump right into that conversation with Will McFadden, Joe Patrick, and Allen Strk right now. Allen, how you doing tonight?
I'm doing fantastic. I just want to mention with the introduction, you didn't mention that Will worked with one of your favorites, Ovi Mahaley. I don't know if that's jealousy there, but you got to mention Ovi.
Yes.
Who I think you could have clamored to be on this list, but I don't know. Fullback questions could be tricky.
Not that tricky, but you got to get on my level to get the fullback questions. But anyway, yeah, sure, yes. Ovi Mahaley now with Michael Turner.
Yeah, definitely a big upgrade for Ovi. Very excited for Ovi. That's awesome. I'm really that show is going to be great. So I'm glad that Mike is joining Ovi to move it forward, because honestly, getting two players just back and forth talking about it, like that is going to be awesome for all of us. So yeah, I can't wait to listen to many more episodes with those two guys.
Absolutely. So great tandem in the backfield, great tandem on the podcast. But let's talk a little bit about Calvin Ridley. And Joe, we'll start off with you. What are some of your sort of memories, when you're an old doddering man, in 40 years, you're going to be telling your grandkids, oh, I remember Calvin Ridley. What are those memories you're going to be bringing up to your grandkids, telling them, and like, okay, grandpa, whatever, what is that about Calvin?
I really only have one lasting memory of Calvin. And the reason is because I actually didn't start covering the Falcons until 2022. That was my first season on the beat. And prior to that, when I was hired by 92.9 The Game in 2019, I was on the Braves beat. So funny enough, for this particular player, I've been covering Atlanta United basically since their inception. So during Calvin Ridley's tenure in Atlanta, I was really enjoying the Falcons purely as a fan, or I guess maybe not enjoying is maybe not the best word to use, but I was getting frustrated by the Falcons a lot during that tenure.
That's accurate.
And for some reason in 2019, my boss sent me up there to go get some sound on a day, and we go up. It was leading in. I think it was after they had played Minnesota to open the season that year. And then we were up there ahead of them playing the Eagles in week 2 on Sunday Night Football, if I'm getting that correct. Yeah. And we go in, and I don't know if somebody had mentioned Calvin in a press conference earlier that day or something, but the media wanted to talk to Calvin. And when we got in the locker room after practice, and we go up to him and we ask him, like, hey, Calvin, can you talk to us for a second? And he said, I don't even like the news, and didn't talk to us. And that's the lasting memory I will have of Calvin Ridley. It was kind of funny. Like, we were all just kind of laughing about it. And then when we talked to Mo Sanu to talk him up, and he's like, oh yeah, that's my guy. So like, it was all good, but that was just funny to me. Yeah. So there you go. How about that for a memory?
Okay. Well, we're getting some behind the scenes insight into Calvin Ridley and his media availability. Will, obviously you were there in the building. Can you attest on Calvin not necessarily being the biggest fan of having microphones and cameras stuck in his face? Or, do you have other things that you remember Calvin Ridley for?
Well, I mean, what's crazy though, Joe, we haven't talked about this. 2 minutes before you got to Calvin, I went in there and just said, hey, look, you got a swarm of media coming to get you. You got to come up with an excuse and get out of here. I was looking out for him. I was trying to make sure that he wasn't, you weren't going to waste his time. No, I remember Calvin, like the day that he was drafted, I remember because he fell, right? He was kind of not the consensus because DJ Moore was still in this draft and a lot of people liked him, but coming out of Alabama, everybody viewed Calvin Ridley as kind of that next in line Alabama #1 receiver coming out who was going to do big things in the NFL. So for him to slip and the Falcons to get him there at the end of the first round, that was like, I think a lot of people were kind of impressed with the name Calvin Ridley, that he came here to Atlanta. But, Aaron, we were talking just before we pressed record, and there were some people that didn't like it, as a draft pick because the Falcons did have other needs. It felt a little bit superfluous when you already had Mohamed Sanu and you had Julio Jones. But I think Calvin Ridley, right from the jump, looked like he belonged in the NFL. A lot of the concerns about specifically like press coverage, not even a concern at all. Like he's fine in the league because his route running is so good. And it was from day one. That's kind of the thing that stuck out to me was just his very first OTA, his very first time out there on the field. It was clear that he was already the best route runner on the Falcons. And we had watched Julio Jones for the last couple of years. It was just a different type of receiver. And I think he's proven out throughout the course of his career so far that he is truly an elite route runner. And that is what makes him such a special player.
I mean, that's fair. I was telling you guys before we hit record, I went back and watched some 2020 highlights of Ridley and just the easy separation that he was able to get. And I thought, that season he was, one of the 3 to 5 best route runners in the NFL, up there with the Stephon Diggs and, other players that we talked about as,
Keenan Allen.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's good.
Devontae Adams, those types of guys. So,
he still has no idea what to do with the ball in his hands.
Yeah, that's
oh my God.
I will say, I think I watched him lose like 4 first downs before eventually gaining them back. Like, and just in the press box, you're like, what are you doing? Come on, man. Because you can see the whole field from up there. It's a roller coaster ride every single time.
There was one game, I think it was the opener against Seattle, where he might have lost like 4 or 5 yards. He did like a 360 spin and he just went.
He loves to reverse field like he's in a rugby match. I don't know what's happening.
I mean, even on some of his explosive catches, he was doing that. But it always seemed like there was like 2 plays in one play. Whenever I was going to Calvin, it was like the play until he gets the ball in his hands, and then it was like the play restarts basically with him with the ball, and he could go in any given direction. He had such nimble feet, though. Sometimes it worked out for him, but oftentimes,
he made it look really cool.
Very video gamey, right?
Mm-hmm.
In terms of just like running all over the place, instead of running in one direction. So, but very video gamey in the sense of just, him running circles around, the Marshawn Lattimores of the league, and whatnot. And so, I remember Calvin very fondly. I know, other people might have interesting opinions on Calvin Ridley, in terms of, him not necessarily living up to the expectations of being sort of the next Julio Jones and being that guy that could have, spent, a decade here in Atlanta and been a high level player. Unfortunately, circumstances did not lead to that, but, I have no regrets. I enjoyed the 4 years, right? Yes. The 4 years that we got 3.5.
3.5.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. You saw Thompson Dimitrov, I got no regrets.
Well, the 3 years, because I did not enjoy the half year that we had with Calvin Ridley. And I don't think that's a Calvin Ridley issue. I think that's more of an Arthur Smith issue, but we won't get into that on today's episode. But just going back and just remembering how good a route runner he was. Not the greatest with the ball in his hands, but just an elite route runner. And I can't speak for everybody else, but I just miss it. I just miss having that type of guy that is going to go up against, some of the premier cornerbacks in the NFL and just run circles around them.
Definitely. Yeah. When I was watching his highlights back, I was thinking, this is the kind of receiver the Falcons could use right now to kind of play off of some of these bigger bodied receivers that they have, and I think that when he came into the team, like Julio's numbers jumped up pretty much right away. I thought it helped him out a lot. I think he led the NFL in receiving yards in Ridley's first year. So I think that you could see how it was going to work. Like the proof of concept was kind of there, at least in that portion of the team. But he's also he's just interesting to talk about because he's kind of a tragic figure in a sense. And with obviously everything that happened with him, and it sounds like it kind of stemmed from his house being robbed when in 2021, I guess that was during the first home game against the Eagles. And so that it sounds like that's kind of when things started to spin out of control with the mental health break that then led to the gambling stuff. And I'm just glad he's kind of landed back on his feet and has a chance to get his career going again.
Yeah, definitely. Alan, you got any Calvin Ridley thoughts you want to share?
I just want to mention, because some people might say, why is he on this list? But there aren't many Falcons the last 20 years that could claim to be an all-pro. Like Calvin Ridley was an all-pro in 2020, second team all-pro. And you just saw how dominant he was at times. And when you think of that 2020 season, it was like AJ Terrell, Chris Lidstrom, half a season Julio, Calvin Ridley. Like there were not many positives. Of course, Grady Jarrett as well. So I just think what Calvin Ridley did that year, he really put it all together. But I think we have to give him some praise for 2018 and 2019. Like there were some big moments. I'm not going to mention specific games for question purposes, but he entered the league with a bang. He, for a player of his stature, managed to score a lot of touchdowns, which is kind of hilarious looking back on, given the whole Julio conundrum of not scoring enough touchdowns. Meanwhile, Ridley seemed to be a red zone weapon. So he was just a very dynamic player. We talked about the route running, talked about the separation, but I just always admire the fact that he could really take the top off the defense. And him and Matt Ryan had a great rapport too, which I think was important because I think Ryan was going through not a dark phase, but it seemed like he needs someone else to trust more, especially when it comes to like a vertical threat. Because of course you have Julio, you had Sanu as a possession guy, Austin Hooper was starting to emerge, but they really needed that explosiveness and really provide that for those 3 years.
Yeah. All right, guys. Well, now we'll get into the trivia portion of today's episode. I'll be asking Will 5 questions about Calvin Ridley, and then Alan will ask Joe 5 questions about Calvin Ridley, and whoever has the most correct at the end will move on in this trivia tournament that we call the Falcons Historian Player Shootout to talk about some other Falcons legend later this summer. And if there's a tie after these 5 questions, then we'll go into sudden death, but we'll break that down if need be at the end of today's episode. But we will get into it and put Will McFadden on the hot seat coming up on today's Locked On Falcons. This show is sponsored by BetterHelp, and comparison is often the thief of joy because we often, go on social media and we're looking at other people's lives and we start to feel a little envious. We feel like, hey, why does this person seem to have it all together? When in reality, they probably don't. And therapy is good for us because it can help us focus on what we want, right? What I want, what you want, rather than what other people have. And now you can start to live your best life if you have that type of perspective. And therapy has helped my perspective in the past, which has given me positive coping skills like you can only control what you can control, which I use every Sunday when I'm watching the Atlanta Falcons. And if you're thinking about starting therapy, you can give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online. It's designed to be convenient, flexible, suited to your schedule. All you got to do is fill out a brief questionnaire. You'll get matched with a licensed therapist. And then the great thing about BetterHelp is you can switch therapists at any time for no additional charge. Stop comparing and start focusing with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/lockedon, and you'll get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedon. Guys, I want to tell you about Locked On Sports Today, a free 24/7 sports streaming channel program for you each and every day to bring you the biggest stories, can't miss analysis, news, opinions, so much more, streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app. And also check out Locked On Sports Atlanta on YouTube, streaming 24/7 or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app. It's all part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. All right, my friend Will, are you ready?
Yes, and so I have to answer in the form of a question, right? That's how this goes?
Yes.
Okay, good.
Okay. All right, number 1. After being blanked for 0 catches in his NFL debut, Calvin Ridley broke out the following week by scoring his first NFL touchdown against this opponent?
The Carolina Panthers.
That is correct. All right, one down. Let's get to the second one. Calvin Ridley tied for the league lead in 20-plus yard receptions in 2020 with 23. It marked the first time since 2013 that a player other than Julio Jones led the Falcons in that category. Who led the team in 20-plus yard receptions during 2013?
So that was the year Julio was hurt. I mean, I want to say it was... I know that was the Harry Douglas year, though. I'm going to say Harry Douglas.
Is that your final answer?
Final answer.
That is correct.
Ah, there you go.
It's not in the form of a question.
What is Harry Douglas?
It was a question in my mind, Joe. Trust me.
Number 3. Calvin Ridley caught at least one touchdown pass against this rival team in each of his 4 seasons in Atlanta. Name the opponent.
Did you say in a division rival team or just NFC rival team?
I said rival team. I did not specify.
Ooh, okay.
Do the Falcons have AFC rivals?
That's a good question.
Yeah.
The Patriots, I guess. Everybody.
Yeah, I was like, I'm not a big fan of the Patriots.
Bill Belichick and Tom Brady. But go ahead.
Let's see. In each game as a Falcon.
Each season
as a Falcon. I'm going to say Tampa.
That is correct.
All right.
3 for 3. Okay, let's see if we can keep the streak going. Number 4, Calvin Ridley's last touchdown catch from Matt Ryan came versus this opponent in 2021.
Because there was a weird gap there. I don't think he played the Panthers. Was it Miami? Final answer?
It was Miami. Yes, that is correct.
Man.
Number
What's
5.
up, Joe? What's up?
Number 5. All right, let's see if we can get the clean sweep. Calvin Ridley had 4 consecutive games of 100 or more yards in December 2020. Can you name 3 of those 4 opponents?
2020. So that was my last year with the team. I know they played Kansas City was the late year because then they played Buffalo, I think, in 21. So I'm going to say Kansas City is one of them. And then I feel like they're probably just division teams. So I'll say New Orleans and Tampa and Kansas City.
That is correct. There was the Saints, the Chargers,
No way.
and the Chiefs were the 4 games.
Who was the other team?
The Chargers.
I do not remember them playing the Chargers, but that doesn't matter. All right.
Man.
Well, hey, that was fun. Let's do it again anytime.
It's the second person to go 5 for 5. You and David Shealy.
Tough one, Joe.
Hope you got some true false for me here, Alan.
No.
All right, so let's get into that. See what Joe can do as we wrap up today's Locked On Falcons. Summertime is great for a lot of things, but it's not always great when it comes to sports, right? Now that the playoffs are over, we're getting fewer and fewer games. Baseball's still going strong, but the sports just aren't sporting like they used to. But FanDuel is here to keep the party going. This summer, they're hooking up all customers with a booster bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. Head on over to FanDuel.com/lockedon, and you can make the most out of your summer. And whether you want to bet on baseball, whether you want to bet on the upcoming NFL season, the upcoming NBA season, now that Zachary Risachet is doing things for the Hawks, you can all find that available at FanDuel. How many yards is Kirk Cousins going to have? How many touchdowns? Is Raheem going to win Coach of the Year? All that stuff and more is available at FanDuel.com/lockedon. So go check it out and make the most out of your summer. FanDuel is an official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball.
Okay, I just want to mention before starting up that Will accidentally probably gave one answers to these questions. If you remember it, Joe, you're going to get it right away. But
Okay.
It's not the first one. You'll hear it eventually.
Okay.
First question: Ridley's career-long touchdown came as a Falcon. Who did the 75-yard touchdown come against?
I believe this came against the Panthers.
Say final answer.
Yeah.
Man, it's already over. It was the Saints.
Oh, the Saints. I always get those teams confused when I'm.
We'll still go.
Was it like the first play of the half of the second half?
It might have been. I just remember it was week 3, and I think he burnt PJ Williams. I remember PJ Williams got benched. You remember that, Aaron? Will?
No, I don't.
Okay.
I do know. I remember they swapped Marshawn, or like, dude, he destroyed the Saints. That's not like he gave every single one of them trouble. So yeah. You're probably right, Joe.
You're probably right, but yeah.
That was his third career game. But anyway, let's keep it going. So Ridley scored a memorable touchdown against the Chargers game, which nobody remembers here, but it was a play where Matt Ryan wasn't the quarterback. Who threw the touchdown pass to Ridley?
I think I know this one. Was it Russell Gage?
Yes, the Gage Cat. Great times.
That was a great play.
Great times. Question 3. Ridley had 2 games of 2 touchdowns or more in his rookie season. Name both opponents that it came against.
Okay, one was the Saints. So he had a 3-touchdown game against the Saints. I'm totally blanking on the other. Hold on. I don't. Was it the Bengals?
Wow, great job. That is correct. Back-to-back games.
That's right. Yeah. That's right.
He started his NFL career with a bang. People forget, man. He was
yeah, we were like, is he going to catch 18 touchdown passes this year? What's happening?
And this was during the peak era of red zone Strk. People thought the Falcons were hopeless in red zone, and then they went like 11 for 11. It's just unfortunate the defense lost every player match. Okay, this is the one that Will kind of gave away. Who was the only receiver selected higher than Ridley in the 2018 draft?
I know this one. DJ Moore to the Panthers.
That is correct. Last question. 3 wide receivers had more receiving yards than Ridley in his outstanding 2020 season. Name 2 of the wide receivers.
Ooh, gosh. Justin Jefferson and I don't know. These are going to be wrong. I'll say Stephon Diggs, but I don't think those are not right.
So you're going with Jefferson and Diggs?
Yeah.
Man, you're right, and I'm really bummed out for you because that first question, we really couldn't talk about.
Oh, I was confident too. I thought I had it. Oh my gosh, I can't believe I got the last one. That was just a pure guess.
I would have said you made me sweat, but like you didn't. You did it in the reverse order.
I did the whole way. Yeah,
but I was already in the bag. But like that was bravo to you, Joe. That was great.
It was a tough battle. I ran into a buzzsaw here. Guy who was working at the team at the time.
I literally don't think I would have gotten the 2021 unless because I just distinctly remember that like Kansas City game because it was Raheem and then that was the blueprint.
I remember they weren't they about to win that game? Was AJ Terrell dropped kind of the pick in the end zone that would have probably won them that game. Yeah, I mean like that was
kicking that game too. Yeah,
I was honestly just guessing with New Orleans and Tampa. I was like, I assume they played some NFC South teams late. So yeah, but. That was fun.
I didn't know the answer to that one either. Yeah.
Great job, guys. Good question.
Good matchup.
You guys crushed it, man. This is by far the best performance between both people. And for a player who, not the most distinguished player, not the most recognizable player, but, man, he had a hell of a run.
He did. I miss it. Like I said, I've been depressed all day just remembering how good Calvin Ridley was and, like, why haven't we been able to experience this the last 3 years, Like we had those first 3 years, so
just seeing him score the touchdowns, it's like, man, like Falcons receivers haven't even scored that many touchdowns in these last few. Like since I've been covering the team, it's like a minor miracle if a receiver like catches a touchdown pass.
It's that, and it's the Saints killer aspect to Calvin. It was the fact that he was scoring touchdowns against New Orleans, that he had that 3-touchdown game against New Orleans. Like he only, I think, finished with 4 total touchdowns against New Orleans, like in his time with the Falcons. He may still only have 4, but he just gained that reputation because if it wasn't touchdowns, he was getting like 130 yards against like Marshawn Lattimore on a given Sunday. So it was like he and Deion Jones were just like the 2 players of the last like 15 years that I remember just early in their career got that like moniker of, oh, they're going to bring it against our most hated rival. And therefore like, we love them no matter what. So I kind of miss him just for that aspect of it.
Yeah.
I used to love when he would draw DPIs on Lattimore because Lattimore would be losing his mind because, Lattimore loves to be overly physical. And it would always be like a 30-yard play too because it would be like a vertical shot. So, yeah, those were some fun battles.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like just in general in the division, he did a lot because we talked about the Panthers a little bit, the Bucks. So, I mean, NFC South games, they get heat. So, hopefully, Drake London.
I think he caught 2 touchdowns against Tampa again this year. This past
year.
Yeah,
yeah. So he has 6 total. Because I thought you guys were going to ask which NFC South team does Calvin Ridley have the most career touchdowns against, and he's got 4 against Carolina, 4 against New Orleans, and 6 against Tampa because of the 2 this past year. But he had 4 in 3.5 years against the NFC South, like every single team in the NFC South. It's pretty solid for a receiver. 12 touchdowns total against the division in like 4 seasons. That's pretty solid.
Final question just for everyone here. Do we give Dirk Cutter any credit for Calvin Ridley's development, considering Dirk Cutter was the offensive coordinator during his explosive year?
I mean, I saw what Arthur Smith did with Calvin Ridley in this offense, and it was the grossest thing I've ever seen. So clearly Dirk Cutter gets something in terms of credit just by default because it's not what Arthur Smith did. So
I plead the fifth.
Joe, any thoughts?
I have no real opinion on that, honestly. Like since I've been covering the team, in all seriousness, since I've been covering the team, I've really tried to learn more about the game. Because previous to that, I mean, I played in high school, but I was really not getting into the nuts and bolts of it. I was purely enjoying it because I do that for a lot of other things that I cover. So I honestly don't have an opinion. I will say there was a couple. I think there was he caught the same touchdown play twice where he comes into the backfield in motion and then they just kind of swing it out to him on a modified screen. It's kind of clever.
Yeah, it's like that half orbit kind of.
Yeah.
Was it satellite motion? No, Joe, because you like the nuts and bolts, I can't give an actual answer though. I did that year ask Dirk Cutter about, because it was the first time that we really noticed, and I think Joe Brady made this extremely popular at LSU, although it was in 2018. So it was very contemporary when it was all happening, but it was the tight splits with all the receivers, and you would get almost these wing looking formations because you'd have even smaller receivers 3 yards from the tackle, just kind of really condensed. And so I asked Dirk Cutter what the benefit is for that type of formation for an offense. And it's really about kind of that 2-way go that it allows normal outside receivers, instead of having that boundary that a corner can just kind of use as a barrier right there. It brings these guys in where now everybody's kind of like a slot corner where everybody has to worry about he can go inside, he can go outside. And for a player like Calvin Ridley with that specific skill set, it may have helped him set up a lot of those double moves that he used to devastating effect early in the year, and specifically against teams like New Orleans and Carolina. So I don't know if that's all credit to Dirk Cutter. He definitely had a hand in part of it. But I do think it was putting his players in positions of strength, and Calvin Ridley specifically. So yeah, that was kind of a fun wrinkle that I remember from that time.
Standing breakdown. Thank you. You're giving listeners real XNO talk right now.
Much better than they normally get on this podcast.
Last thing I want to mention, so Will, you're advancing to the next round. You will be facing the winner of Dave Choate and Daniel Flick. And the player you will be quizzed on next is the great Algie Crumpler.
Oh, my favorite player as a kid.
Player.
Let's go. I interviewed him when I was in 4th grade, actually. I still have that DVD somewhere. So.
Okay, you got to stay for the episode.
Wow.
We'll talk more about
He's been
that.
preparing for this moment for decades.
I have. He was giving me the answer to that question, or answers to these questions way back then. So
Awesome. That's one of the episodes we're really anticipating because
it's like a looper situation. I just went back in time and gave it to myself in the form of Algie Crumpler.
Memento. Yeah.
So before we sign off, Joe, anything you want to plug? Let the listeners know what's going on with you.
No, just tune in to 92.9 The Game, especially when training camp starts. We'll be, doing a lot of coverage. I know fans aren't going to be out there, but, we're talking as a station. It's our job to try to communicate as best we can what is happening. So, yeah, just keep it locked there, and you'll hear me on there from time to time.
How about you, Will?
Yeah, you guys can check us out at AtlantaFalcons.com. It is our job to cover what is happening as well, but just a little bit better. And you guys can check out, obviously, Tori McElhaney's written work, Taryn Wax written work, Amna Saban. She is also doing a great job. So we're going to be kind of rolling out some podcasts, written articles, all of that good stuff. But yeah, I'm here to kind of keep all of the great work they've been doing rolling right along. So it'll be a challenge, I think, this year's training camp, Joe. Just without fans, it'll be a different flavor to what we're trying to do to really keep everybody, make it feel like you're there. But hey, that's our job, and it's one that I would not trade for the world.
Okay, guys, we really appreciate you joining us on tonight's episode. For those of you that watched or listened, let us know how many of these questions did you do as well as Will and Joe did. Leave a comment here on YouTube. And of course, we have, great content coming your way here on Locked On Falcons the rest of this week. Don't know exactly what it is because we're at that time in the summer where nothing is happening. So I just have to make it up as we go. But make sure you continue to make Locked On Falcons your first listen. All that time, all you got to do is subscribe or follow for free on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. But guys, thanks again for this one. We'll be back next week, I think, with the next Falcons Historian Shootout with Dave Choate and Daniel Flick on why Allen do I always struggle?
I don't know how you're struggling because this is the one you've been waiting for
yes
since we started. We're doing an episode on
Jonathan
Babineau. Like this is the Jonathan Babineau episode. Like
I can't believe I forgot that.
I'm concerned you're gonna make this into a 50-minute episode. Like
we'll see. We'll tune in next week to find out how long that.